Hello, my name is Nanna Schmidt, and I'm here to talk about a paper that Rajiv Maher and I wrote together. First, I'm just gonna explain a little bit about how we initially started doing the field work and what was the initial thoughts we had about the research interest and the interest in the LICO communities that we did this paper about. And then I'm just going to talk a bit about what my first impressions were when going on this field trip, and also later when we together collected more data as it progressed. I visited the LICO community back in 2018, and the LICO community were and still are part of a project with the NGO WCS, Wildlife Conservation Society. They're part of this project funded by the NIDA. So we had the opportunity to visit them together with the NGO and to understand how the NGO is engaging the LICO community in a coffee project for sustainable livelihoods. It's very interesting to observe, and we also had a chance to talk with them, and we were very driven by understanding how people thought about themselves participating in the projects and understanding what it meant for them to be part of it, but also how actually this project came about, how the NGO engaged people in the project. And what we at first found interesting just after the field trip was that we seemed to observe some participants in the project engaging both from the NGO and from the communities, with some tension between them. It kind of struck us as there was a few unsaid conflicts under the surface, and some of them became vocal in parts during the field trip and later on when we had more interviews. So we thought that was very interesting to look into, since it's a project obviously funded to mostly benefit the communities and their livelihoods. We wanted to understand if there were any parts of the project that did not live up to any expectations, or how they felt about the project as such and as it developed. So this became our main kind of hunch, or for the lack of better words, drive for pursuing further analytical frameworks to decipher the data and better understand what's actually going on here. And we started to ask more questions of the data, and also later on came to collect more data to better understand some of the questions. So with that, I'm going to leave it to you, Rajiv, to talk a bit more about how we approach the analysis and further on.
Yeah, thanks, Nanna. There's not much more I can add to your great summary of the paper. But we're absolutely delighted and very pleasantly surprised that our paper was selected for this very prestigious award at CMS. And yeah, I mean, as Nanna stated, a few years ago, Nanna did field work in the LECO community in the Bolivian Amazon to really understand more about this development project around conservation for climate change and market-based conservation livelihood. And as Nanna stated, there was some sort of, she came back and said, everything seems fine on the surface, but there are these under the surface sort of tensions that she could really sense and perceive, and she had hunches, and so something that we discussed a lot over the last few years, to really try and get to the crux of what is this tension. The community is such and it's really important to understand the history here, and we do mention that in the paper around how the community for decades have been fighting to regain and restitute their lost land to non-indigenous farmers. The community, the Leco community, are indigenous to Bolivia. And after winning this hard fought out battle of getting their land back, one of the agreements with the Bolivian and Danish state, because Danida were also involved in this project, was that the community would have to undergo climate change and conservation development. And so this meant deviating from the sort of development path of the community had traditionally taken, which was around cocoa farming. And so it meant the arrival of a very large US conservation NGO. And so we really, in the paper, tried to unpack this relationship that's going on there. And we turned to really understand the tensions and the power dynamics and you could say the eventual cooptation of the community. We turned to a concept that's a really interesting metaphor by Foucault that's not really been overlooked, but it hasn't been as well as used as you could imagine by management scholars, and that is the concept of pastoral power, where Foucault talks about the shepherd, shepherding the flock. The manager is as almost a shepherd who governs the soul as a way of penetrating the mind of the flock of others, but in a very gentle way. Rather, a lot of people have likened this to the work of coaches and psychologists, and also a lot of marketing scholars have written about this too, about how changing the reward and value system of people so that they can basically, you can nudge people towards embracing neoliberal values much more, and really the pastoral power concept, it goes it's at the crossroad, at the intersection between consent and coercion, and so we found this very completely ideal for the empirical context that we're looking at. And in the paper we also talk about how the NGO, through the pastoral power concept, work towards unlearning the cocoa farming and towards adopting this very modern organic coffee farming method. And one of our sort of key contributions here is the importance of adding a new actor to the whole setup of the pastoral, of the pastor and the sheep, the flock, and that is of the sheepdog. And of course, we don't mean to be disrespectful with that term, but as we know, in this image that you can imagine, there's always a sheepdog who's doing the hard and grueling work of corralling and penning the sheep. And what we find is that there's a local promoter who the NGO turned to find a sort of who does translation work to do this sort of disciplinary work and surveillance, but at the same time also doing a lot of the capacity building and training. And so we try to, in the paper, we try to conceptualize this relational dynamics and power dynamics under this metaphor. So we hope the paper will be of use to other management scholars and beyond for conceptualizing similar situations also within organizations, which we're sure also take place. So without further ado, I will say goodbye and yeah, thank you for your attention. Nanna?
Oh, thank you very much. We appreciate the consideration for this award. Thanks.
Thank you.